That's why it matters, the little black girl said, sliding her lunch across the table before anyone could stop her. The cafeteria at Maple Ridge Elementary had been loud a second ago, full of the usual scrape of plastic trays, the squeak of sneakers on wax tile, and the high, careless noise children made when they still believed lunch would always be waiting for them. Then something shifted. Heads turned one by one. A carton of chocolate milk tipped and rolled in a slow circle near the end of the table. Under the white cafeteria lights, Nia Brooks sat small and straight-backed on the bench, her faded yellow cardigan buttoned wrong at the top, her braids tied with blue beads that clicked softly when she moved. She was 9 years old, dark-eyed, quiet, and almost always the last child anyone noticed until there was a reason to. Today, there was a reason. Ethan Cole stood beside the table with empty hands and red ears, trying not to look at anyone. He had forgotten his lunch at home again. Sophie Reed was still staring down at the mess by her shoes, where her tray had slipped and sent applesauce, carrot sticks, and a grilled cheese sandwich across the floor in a sad little pile no second grader could fix without crying. A lunch monitor had already called for a custodian. A few kids were pretending not to stare. A few others were staring on purpose. Nia looked from Ethan to Sophie, then down at her own lunch. It wasn't much. Half a turkey sandwich wrapped in crinkled foil, one small apple with a bruise near the stem, a pack of saltine crackers, and a single oatmeal cookie tucked inside a napkin like something meant to be saved. It was the kind of lunch packed by careful hands counting dollars down to the last one. The kind of lunch that came from a narrow kitchen with a flickering stove light and a mother who left for work before sunrise. Nia unwrapped the sandwich slowly. The smell of turkey and mustard drifted up between the noise and bleach-clean air of the room. Then, with the calm seriousness of someone much older than 9, she broke the sandwich in half, then in half again. One piece went to Ethan, one to Sophie. She pushed the apple toward the middle of the table and split the crackers between them with small, precise fingers. The cookie she left untouched for 1 second, turning it over in her palm as if measuring something no one else could see. Then she broke that too. "Here," she said. Her voice was soft, but in the sudden hush it carried farther than most grown voices ever did. Ethan blinked. "But that's your food." Sophie's chin trembled. "You didn't even eat yet." Nia gave the tiniest shrug, like hunger was not the biggest thing in the world. "Then we all eat a little." Across the aisle, a parent volunteer arranging napkins near the milk cooler let out a surprised little laugh. Not cruel exactly, but edged with the kind of disbelief that could still sting. "Sweet girl," she said, stepping closer. "But honey, that's all you have." Nia looked up at her. There was no anger in her face. No shame either. Just a stillness that felt too steady for a child her age. The overhead light caught the edge of the foil in front of her and threw a cold silver flash across her small hands. "That's why it matters," she said. The table went silent. Even the kids who had been whispering stopped. Somewhere behind them, the lunch line kept moving, trays clacking forward inch by inch, but at Nia's table, time seemed to hold its breath. A boy at the next table lowered his juice pouch without taking a sip. A teacher near the vending machine glanced over. Someone lifted a phone, almost without thinking, and angled it toward the little girl in the yellow cardigan who was giving away the last of her lunch like it was the most natural thing in the world. Nia didn't notice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. She was already peeling the bruise off the apple with her thumbnail, so Sophie could have the better side. Ethan sat down slowly, as if afraid the moment might break if he moved too fast. Sophie took her piece of sandwich with both hands. For a few seconds, the three of them ate in the pale cafeteria light while the smell of floor cleaner, warm bread, and milk hung in the air. And in that ordinary public school lunchroom, with its long gray tables and scuffed linoleum and paper snowflakes still taped crookedly to the far wall from winter, something invisible began to turn. No one there knew that by nightfall a video of that moment would cross the city, climb through a dozen group chats, land on a local news page, and keep moving until it reached a penthouse office 40 miles away. No one knew that a billionaire would stop mid-step when he heard that little girl's voice. No one knew that inside Nia Brooks's backpack, folded small enough to fit in the front pocket beside 2 pencils and a pink eraser worn nearly flat, there was a note so old the edges had turned soft with time. And no one at that table could have guessed that the words she spoke over half a sandwich and one bruised apple were about to wake up a secret someone rich, powerful, and grieving had spent 20 years trying to bury. By the time the last lunch bell rang, the room had already moved on the way rooms full of children always did, fast, careless, almost innocent in how quickly they forgot what had just mattered. Trays were dumped. Milk cartons were crushed in small hands. Chairs screeched back across the floor. But something of that moment stayed behind like warmth on a seat after someone stands up. It stayed in the way Ethan kept glancing at Nia as they walked back toward class, as if he still could not understand why she had shared food she clearly needed herself. It stayed in the way Sophie held the last corner of her napkin all through reading time, smoothing it over and over with her fingertips because it had once wrapped part of Nia's cookie. And it stayed in the phone of the parent volunteer who had laughed first, and then, without quite meaning to, pressed record. Nia did not know that. She sat at her desk by the window in room 12, her pencil held carefully between her fingers, copying spelling words from the board while the pale afternoon light slid across the scratched laminate top of her desk. She wrote slowly, neatly, every letter standing straight. Outside, a yellow bus sighed at the curb and a flag snapped once in the March wind. Inside, the heater rattled under the windowsill and the classroom smelled faintly of crayons, dry erase marker, and the peanut butter crackers somebody had opened too early. Mrs. Harper moved between the rows with her usual calm, shoes-on-linoleum rhythm, collecting math folders and reminding the class that science fair boards were due Friday. She was a kind teacher, but observant in the way kind people often were. She had noticed Nia's lunch before, noticed the small portions, noticed how the little girl never traded, never asked for extras, never complained. Now, after what happened in the cafeteria, concern settled into her chest and would not leave. When the final bell released the building into its burst of backpacks and footsteps, Mrs. Harper touched Nia's desk lightly with 2 fingers. "Nia, sweetheart, wait 1 minute for me, all right?" Nia looked up at once. Children who were used to pleasing adults always recognized that tone. "Yes, ma'am," she said. The other students streamed past them in a blur of jackets and chatter. Ethan paused by the door like he wanted to say something, then thought better of it and left. Sophie gave Nia a tiny wave. Then the room emptied until there were only the 2 of them, a low hum from the hallway, and the late-day sun turning the edges of everything gold. Mrs. Harper crouched beside the desk instead of towering over it. "I wanted to ask you something." Nia set her pencil down. "Okay. Did you eat enough today?" The question was gentle, but it landed hard. Nia's eyes flickered once toward her backpack hanging from the hook beside her chair. "I ate some." Mrs. Harper kept her voice soft. "Do you have lunch every day at home? I mean, does your mama send what she can?" Nia nodded quickly, too quickly. "My mama always sends lunch." "I am sure she does." Mrs. Harper smiled, then let the silence breathe for a second. "But do you ever feel like there is not quite enough?" Nia looked down at her hands. They were small, dark, and very still in her lap. "Sometimes enough is enough," she said. And for a moment Mrs. Harper did not know what to do with a sentence like that coming from a 9-year-old child. The teacher's heart tightened. This was exactly why she had stayed behind. Children who lived with scarcity learned strange kinds of grace too early. "Nia," she said carefully, "you did a beautiful thing today. But you do not have to give your lunch away if it means you go hungry." Nia lifted her head then, and there was no defiance in her face, only that same quiet steadiness from the cafeteria. "They were hungrier than me." Mrs. Harper almost asked how a little girl could know that, then stopped herself because the answer was already there in Nia's eyes. Some children could tell. Some children lived close enough to the edge of things to recognize that look in somebody else. Down the hall, a locker slammed. The intercom crackled with a static announcement from the front office. Mrs. Harper stood slowly. "I am going to call your mother, just to check in. Not because you are in trouble." Nia's shoulders stiffened anyway. "She works. I know. I will be respectful of her time." The teacher gave her a reassuring smile, but the worry had already bloomed across the little girl's face like a shadow over water. Nia nodded once and reached for her backpack. As she lifted it, the zipper pocket at the front hung slightly open. Inside, just for a second, Mrs. Harper saw the corner of an old folded paper, soft with wear, tucked carefully beside a small eraser and 2 sharpened pencils. Nia noticed her glance and closed the zipper at once, not rudely, not guiltily, just protectively, like someone shielding something precious from the weather. Then she slipped her arms through the straps and followed Mrs. Harper into the hallway, where afternoon light stretched long across the waxed floor and children's voices echoed from far away. At the front office, the secretary spoke into a headset while sorting dismissal slips. A television mounted high in the corner played the local news on mute. Nobody was paying attention to it yet. Mrs. Harper reached for the phone on the counter and began dialing the number listed for Lena Brooks. Nia stood beside the chair by the wall, small and silent beneath the buzzing fluorescent light, her backpack held against her chest. She could smell printer ink, old coffee, and the rain coming in through the crack around the front doors. Somewhere in the building, a phone rang again. And while Mrs. Harper waited for Lena to answer, the video from the lunchroom was already moving far beyond Maple Ridge Elementary, crossing screens, cities, and strangers, carrying with it the image of a little girl who had almost nothing and still knew how to divide it by 3. Lena Brooks answered on the 4th ring with the tired, careful voice of someone used to taking calls she could not afford to miss. Behind her words came the low industrial hum of machines, the hollow rattle of rolling carts, and somewhere farther off, a buzzer opening a secure door. "This is Lena." Mrs. Harper introduced herself gently from the front office, while Nia stood close enough to hear only one side of the conversation. The little girl tightened her grip on the strap of her backpack and fixed her eyes on a crack in the tile floor near the secretary's desk. Outside the glass doors, the sky had turned the color of wet cement, and the first drops of rain were tapping softly against the sidewalk. No, she is not in trouble," Mrs. Harper said, glancing at Nia with a reassuring look she hoped the child could feel. "I only wanted to check in about lunch today." There was a pause on the other end. Then Lena's voice came back lower, tighter. "Did she give hers away again?" Nia's chin lifted just slightly. Mrs. Harper noticed. "Again?" she asked. Lena let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, except there was no joy in it. "She thinks I do not know, but I know my daughter. She has got a heart bigger than our kitchen table." The secretary at the desk kept typing, though more slowly now. The television in the corner continued to glow silently above them, flashing images of traffic, weather maps, and then a looping video thumbnail that Nia did not recognize from where she stood. Mrs. Harper softened her voice even more. "I was concerned she might not be getting enough herself." Another pause followed, and this one stayed longer. When Lena finally answered, her honesty came out plain and unadorned, the way truth sometimes does when a person is too tired to decorate it. "We get by," she said. "Some weeks better than others. I pack what I can. It is never nothing, but I know it is not much." Nia swallowed hard. She knew every part of that sentence. Knew the sound of the refrigerator door opening to light instead of abundance. Knew the scrape of a spoon against the bottom of a peanut butter jar turned upside down to get one more sandwich out of it. Knew the way her mother smiled when there was only enough deli meat for 3 days and called it a challenge instead of a problem. Mrs. Harper leaned one hand on the counter, her expression gentling into something almost maternal. "Miss Brooks, your daughter was very kind today." Lena's response came at once. That she was. She shared nearly all of her lunch with 2 classmates. That sounds like Nia. There was pride there now, but it carried worry right underneath it like a second current moving under dark water. Mrs. Harper hesitated before asking the next question. "Can you come by after your shift tomorrow morning? I would like to talk with you in person, just to make sure we are supporting her the right way." For a second, all Nia could hear was the machine noise in the background and the soft static of the phone line. Then Lena said, "I get off at 6:30. I can be there by 7. "That would be wonderful." Mrs. Harper thanked her and ended the call with the kind of gentleness usually reserved for fragile things. When she set the receiver down, Nia was still staring at the floor. "Your mama is coming in tomorrow," she said. Nia nodded once. "Yes, ma'am. She does not sound upset with you." Nia gave a tiny shrug. "She just gets quiet when she worries." The rain outside thickened, threading silver down the glass. The front office lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the secretary finally glanced up from her desk. "You can sit if you want, baby," she said kindly, pointing to the molded plastic chair near the wall. Nia sat, but only on the edge, her backpack still clutched against her chest like a second heartbeat. She could feel the old folded note inside the front pocket, pressing lightly through the fabric as if reminding her it was there. A few minutes passed. Mrs. Harper stepped into the hallway to speak with the principal. The secretary answered another phone call. And then, without warning, the volume on the television clicked on. A touching moment inside a local elementary school is getting a lot of attention tonight, the newscaster said. Nia looked up. On the screen, under the bright wash of cafeteria lights, she saw herself. Small yellow cardigan, blue beads in her braids, foil shining in her hands. She saw Ethan's red ears, Sophie's crumpled face, the apple, the crackers, the careful breaking of the cookie. She heard her own voice fill the front office, clear and soft, and impossibly strange outside her own body. That is why it matters. The secretary turned. Mrs. Harper reappeared at the door. Even the custodian passing the office slowed for half a second to look. The camera on the news clip zoomed in just enough to catch Nia's face as she pushed the food toward her classmates, serious and calm in a room full of noise. Then the anchor's voice returned. The short video has already been shared thousands of times this afternoon. Nia felt heat rise under her skin. Not shame exactly. Something more fragile than that. Exposure. The feeling of being seen too suddenly, too brightly. Mrs. Harper stepped back into the office, eyes wide in disbelief. But before she could say a word, the station cut to a split screen showing comments pouring in beneath the video online. One line glowed larger than the others for a brief second before the shot changed again, and Nia did not have time to read it. Far away, beyond the rain and school traffic and the narrow neighborhoods on the east side of the city, someone in a glass-walled office had already watched the clip 3 times without moving. And as Nia sat frozen in the hard plastic chair beneath the hum of fluorescent lights, she had no idea that her voice had just reached the one man in the city who would recognize the truth hidden behind those 6 simple words. The ride home happened in a blur of rain, windshield wipers, and silence. Lena Brooks arrived 23 minutes after the call, still wearing navy scrub pants under a long gray coat that smelled faintly of detergent, starch, and the lemon-clean scent of the hospital laundry room. Her badge was clipped crookedly to her chest, and there were pale half-moons under her eyes that no amount of pride could hide. But the moment she stepped into the front office and saw her daughter sitting so still in that hard plastic chair, something in her face softened at once. "Hey, baby," she said, kneeling just enough to smooth one hand over Nia's braids. Nia stood quickly and folded herself into her mother's side, without saying much. Mrs. Harper explained the situation gently, and Lena listened with both hands wrapped around the strap of her purse, nodding once here, once there, the way tired people do when they are concentrating hard on staying composed. She was embarrassed to be here, that much was clear, but not because of what Nia had done. There was no shame in her eyes when she looked at her daughter, only worry, and beneath that, something fiercer. The principal, Mr. Delaney, joined them briefly and spoke in the careful, measured tone adults used when they were trying not to sound like they were making judgments. He assured Lena that the school only wanted to help, that there were lunch assistance programs and support forms and food pantry partnerships if needed. Lena thanked him twice. Her voice stayed polite, but the muscles in her jaw tightened all the same. Nia watched the whole exchange from beneath lowered lashes, feeling every word land in places she could not explain. She knew her mother hated being looked at with pity, not because she was proud in the wrong way, but because she had spent too many years proving that hardship was not the same thing as failure. When they finally stepped back out into the rainy evening, the cold air felt clean after the front office. Water dripped from the awning in thin silver lines. Their old Honda started on the second try, coughing once before settling into a rough idle, and they drove east through slick streets streaked with headlight reflections. Neither of them spoke much at first. The radio stayed off. The heater blew lukewarm air that smelled faintly dusty, and Nia pressed her backpack against her knees in the passenger seat, careful with the front pocket where the folded note rested. Outside, the city changed as they drove. Brick storefronts gave way to smaller roads, chain-link fences, narrow apartment blocks, corner stores glowing under buzzing signs. By the time they pulled into the cracked parking lot of Willow Creek Apartments, the rain had eased to a mist. Their building stood 3 stories high, paint faded, balcony rails rusting at the joints, but the windows on the second floor glowed warm with other people's dinners and televisions and ordinary life. Inside apartment 2B, the air held the comforting mix of laundry soap, radiator heat, and rice left warming in a pot. The place was small, but Lena kept it neat. A narrow galley kitchen opened into a living room with a worn brown couch, a standing lamp that leaned slightly to the left, and a folding table near the window where Nia did her homework. A pair of clean sneakers sat beneath it, lined up carefully heel to heel. Lena set her keys in the same blue ceramic bowl she always used and let out a long breath that seemed to come from her bones. "Shoes off," she said softly. Nia slipped out of hers and set her backpack by the table, though not far from reach. For a few minutes, they moved through their usual evening rhythm without speaking much. Lena changed out of her coat, rinsed the rice, stirred a pot of black beans, and sliced the last of a smoked sausage into thin coins so it would stretch farther. Nia washed her hands, set out 2 plates, and folded napkins into neat little squares. The kitchen light above the stove flickered once, then steadied. Rain ticked lightly against the window. It might have been an ordinary night if not for the quiet sitting between them like a third person in the room. Finally, Lena turned from the stove and looked at her daughter. "You want to tell me why you gave your lunch away?" Her tone was gentle, but direct. Nia stood by the table, tracing a finger along the wood grain. "Ethan forgot his lunch. Sophie dropped hers." "I heard that part." Lena stirred the beans slowly. "What I am asking is why you gave all that you had." Nia thought about that. Her mother waited. She always waited, never pulling answers out of her like loose thread. "Because they looked embarrassed," Nia said at last. "And hungry." Lena's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Not surprise. Recognition. "Baby, you cannot fix every empty thing you see." Nia looked up. "I know. Then why does it feel like you keep trying?" The question hung there, warm and heavy above the stove. Nia's eyes drifted to her backpack. Lena noticed. A silence passed between them, softer than the ones before. Then Nia walked to the table, unzipped the front pocket, and carefully pulled out the folded paper she had been carrying all day. The edges were worn smooth from years of being opened and closed. She held it with both hands the way church ladies held him cards, respectfully, like it contained more than ink. Lena saw it and went very still. "You still keep that?" she asked quietly. Nia nodded. "Every day." She unfolded it with slow fingers. The paper was creased into quarters, the handwriting neat, but slightly faded now. Dark blue ink softened by time. Lena did not have to step closer to know every word written there. She had read them once on a night that changed more than one life, then tucked the note away where she thought it would rest forever. But children sometimes rescued old truths without asking permission. Nia looked down at the sentence in the center of the page and read it out loud, her voice small and steady in the kitchen light. "If someone beside you is hungry, you do not eat like a stranger." The room went still. The beans simmered softly. The radiator clicked. Outside, tires hissed on wet pavement. Lena set the spoon down very carefully on the stove and pressed her fingertips against the counter as if grounding herself in something solid. "Where did you get that tonight?" she asked, though she already knew. Nia touched the bottom of the page where the ink had faded most. "From my pencil box. I always keep it there." "No, baby," Lena said, her voice almost a whisper now. "I mean, where did you first get it?" Nia lifted her eyes. "You gave it to me when I was little. You said some words are too important to leave in a drawer." Lena closed her eyes for a brief second. When she opened them again, they looked shinier than before. Nia had seen her mother tired, frustrated, even close to tears once or twice after bills came due, but this was different. This looked like memory. Deep memory. The kind that rose from years ago without warning and changed the temperature of a room. Nia held the note a little tighter. "Mama," she said softly, "who wrote it?" And in the hush that followed, with the stove light flickering and the rain tapering off beyond the thin apartment walls, Lena Brooks understood that the question she had spent years avoiding had finally made it to her table. Lena did not answer right away. She turned the stove down until the beans barely whispered in the pot, then reached for the note with hands that suddenly looked older than they had a minute ago. The paper trembled only once between her fingers before she steadied it. Nia watched her mother's face the way children watch the sky before rain, trying to understand what was coming by the smallest changes in light. "A girl wrote it," Lena said at last. Her voice was low, careful, as if each word had to cross a bridge built years ago. "Not much older than you when I first met her. Maybe 11, maybe 12. Nia leaned against the table, listening with her whole body. The kitchen had gone soft around them, all the usual noises shrinking back. The radiator clicked. The spoon rested on the stovetop in a line of reflected yellow light. Who was she? Nia asked. Lena looked down at the sentence again, and something almost like a smile touched the corner of her mouth, though it carried sadness with it. Her name was Claire Whitmore. The name meant nothing to Nia, but the way her mother said it made it feel important. Was she your friend? Lena let out a slow breath. For a little while, yes. In the way some people become part of your life very fast, because hard times do not wait for proper introductions. She folded the note once, then opened it again, as if memory had become something physical in her hands. I was younger than I am now, broke as a church mouse and working 2 jobs. Day shift at a grocery store, evenings cleaning rooms at a rehab center. You were not born yet. I was taking classes when I could, trying to build something better, and my mother had just gotten sick. Real sick. One night at the hospital cafeteria, I saw this little white girl sitting alone with a tray in front of her, not touching a thing. Fancy sweater, shiny shoes, hair brushed so smooth it looked like silk under the lights. Rich child, I thought. Protected child. Not somebody who would ever need anything from the likes of me. Nia blinked. But she did. Lena nodded. She did. I sat down because every other table was full, and after a minute I realized she was not eating because the boy next to her had nothing. His daddy had fallen asleep in a chair and missed the meal cart. The little girl kept looking at her own tray and then at his empty hands. Finally, she pushed half her sandwich toward him. Just like you did today. Nia's fingers curled around the edge of the table. Lena noticed, and the look they shared was small but deep. One of those quiet recognitions that made a room feel full. I asked her why she gave away her dinner when she was clearly hungry herself, Lena continued. And she looked at me with those big serious eyes and said, if someone beside you is hungry, you do not eat like a stranger. I never forgot it. Nia looked down at the paper again, as if the ink had suddenly grown heavier. So she wrote it for you. Lena nodded once. A few days later, we kept running into each other at the hospital. Her younger brother was there to visit sometimes. Their family had more money than I had ever seen in one place. But that little girl did not act like she was above anybody. She talked to cafeteria workers, knew the janitor's name, carried crayons in her backpack and gave them away in sets of 2 because she said nobody should color alone. A soft laugh escaped Lena then, brief and fragile. She was one of those children who made grown people remember how to be decent. The kitchen fell quiet again. Nia could almost see the girl now, even though she had never met her. What happened to her? She asked. Lena's eyes lifted to the rain-speckled window. The building across the lot glowed with television light behind cheap blinds. Somewhere upstairs, someone was dragging a chair across the floor. Life happened, Lena said softly. Sickness happened. Time happened. Her family moved through the world one way, and I moved through it another. But before I stopped seeing her, she wrote this on a piece of hospital stationery and handed it to me folded up like it was treasure. Nia's voice turned smaller. Why did you give it to me? Lena looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because some words save more than one person if you carry them long enough. Nia swallowed. The apartment seemed warmer now, though the old draft still curled near the baseboards. Did Claire know me? Lena's expression softened. No, baby, but I think she would have liked you very much. For the first time that evening, Nia smiled, but only a little. Then her face grew serious again. Is she still alive? Lena's hand closed gently over the note. No, the single word settled over the kitchen like dusk. Nia did not ask how or when. Children often knew when grief had edges they should not touch too fast. Lena stepped closer and tucked one loose braid behind her daughter's ear. Some people leave this world, she said, and still keep teaching after they are gone. Nia nodded slowly, letting that sit inside her. On the counter, Lena's old phone buzzed once against the laminate. She almost ignored it. Almost. But the screen kept glowing, lighting up the dim kitchen with a cold white pulse. Unknown number. Then another call came right after. And another. Lena frowned, wiping her hand on a dish towel before reaching for the phone. Nia watched the color drain from her mother's face as the screen filled, not with missed calls now, but with messages. News station requests. School emails. Social media alerts from an account Lena barely used. At the very top was one message that did not look like the others. It was short, formal. sent from an assistant's email with a name neither of them had seen in years. Lena opened it with her thumb trembling just enough for Nia to notice. The first line was all she read before her breath caught in her chest. Miss Brooks, Mr. Gabriel Whitmore would like to speak with you regarding a video featuring your daughter and a note once written by his sister Claire. For a second, the apartment seemed to lose all sound. The beans still simmered. Rain still ticked faintly at the window. A car door still slammed somewhere out in the parking lot. But inside that narrow kitchen, with the stove light flickering and the old linoleum cool beneath their feet, everything went still around the name Whitmore. Lena read the message again, slower this time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less impossible if she gave them another chance. They did not. Her thumb hovered over the screen, then dropped to her side. Nia watched her mother's face the way she had learned to watch weather, by the little signs first. The tightening around the mouth. The distant look in the eyes. The kind of silence that meant her mother was no longer fully in the room. Mama, Nia asked softly. Lena looked up at once, almost startled to find her daughter standing there. It is nothing for you to worry about. The answer came too quickly, and both of them knew it. Nia did not argue. She just waited, one hand still resting on the edge of the table, the folded note between her fingers. Lena set the phone down face up on the counter, but the screen kept glowing with new messages, cold white light flaring across the dish soap bottle and the chipped ceramic spoon rest by the stove. Another email. Another missed call. A local station wanted an interview. A parenting blog wanted permission to repost the clip. Someone from the district office had sent a formal message about media inquiries. And beneath all of it sat that one line from an assistant to Gabriel Whitmore, precise and polished, and somehow more unsettling than the rest. Lena drew in a breath and let it out slowly through her nose. Eat before it gets cold, she said, turning back to the stove. It was the kind of sentence adults used when they needed a task to hold on to. She spooned beans over the rice, added the thin slices of sausage, and set the plates down at the table with more care than usual. Nia sat. Lena sat across from her. For a minute they ate in silence, the kind made heavier by things unsaid. The kitchen light cast a weak golden circle over the table. Steam lifted from the plates in thin, twisting lines. Nia took 2 small bites, then looked up. Was Claire his sister? Lena nodded. Yes. Did he know you had the note? Lena shook her head once. Not unless somebody told him today. Nia glanced toward the counter, where the phone buzzed again and rattled against the laminate. Why would he want to talk to us now? Lena set her fork down. Her hands were neat hands, working hands, with faint lines of detergent dryness across the knuckles and a tiny burn mark near her wrist from a hot press at the laundry facility 3 years ago. They folded together now, almost like prayer. Because some people do not notice certain parts of their own lives until something breaks the glass in front of them, she said quietly. Nia frowned a little, trying to follow. Lena softened. I mean, maybe he saw something today that made him remember. Nia looked at the note. Me? Lena's eyes filled with something warm and pained all at once. Maybe not just you. Maybe what you carried. The little girl went quiet. She was old enough to understand that adults were not always speaking only about what they said out loud. She took another bite of rice, chewed carefully, and then asked the question that had been sitting between them ever since the message arrived. Did you know them after Claire? Lena did not answer right away. She rose from the table, took her plate to the sink, and ran water over it, though she had barely eaten half. The faucet hissed. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, the walls closer, the air thinner. Not really, she said at last. Life does not always leave room for neat endings. Nia turned that over in her mind. Her mother was not someone who lied, but sometimes she arranged the truth the way she arranged the pantry, with the harder things pushed farther back. The phone buzzed again. This time Lena picked it up before it could stop. The email thread had grown. There was now a second message below the first. Miss Brooks, Mr. Whitmore understands this may come as a surprise. He would only like 10 minutes of your time. He remembers you. Lena stared so long at that line that the screen dimmed in her hand. He remembers you. 20 years slipped through her chest in one sharp, quiet motion. Hospital light. White tile. The hum of machines and wheels and whispered prayers outside closed doors. A girl with gentle eyes and a winter-pale face handing over a folded piece of paper as if kindness itself could be passed hand to hand. And beyond her, Now only in pieces, a boy younger than Lena had first remembered him, sharp-jawed even then, standing back from the room in expensive clothes that did not know what sickness smelled like. Gabriel. Not yet the name people said with awe or irritation in business magazines. Just a grieving brother who had looked at the world as though money should have been enough to command it into fairness. Lena set the phone down again, but more carefully this time. He remembers, she said, almost to herself. Nia heard the weight in the words. Is that bad? Lena looked at her daughter, and something in her expression softened at once. No, baby. Just unexpected. The rain outside had nearly stopped now. Water ran from the roof in a steady ribbon past the kitchen window. Down in the parking lot, headlights swept across the walls and disappeared. Lena returned to the table and sat. She leaned forward, resting her forearms on either side of her plate. And for the first time that evening, she spoke not as a mother trying to protect, but as a woman deciding whether the past had a right to knock on her door. After Claire got sicker, there was a night at the hospital when everything felt like it was slipping. Her family was surrounded by specialists and doctors and people in suits who spoke too softly in hallways. I was only there because my shift ran late and my mama was asleep upstairs in recovery. I should not have mattered to that family at all. But Claire saw people differently. She introduced me to her brother like I belonged in the room. Nia listened without blinking. What did he say? Lena gave the faintest smile. Not much. He was older than her, maybe a teenager, maybe a little more. He looked angry at the whole world. Not rude. Just helpless in a way rich people do not know how to hide when money cannot fix something. Nia glanced at the glowing phone again. And then, Lena's eyes lowered to the table. The wood grain caught the light like running water. Then something happened that changed a lot of things. Not all at once, but enough. She stopped there. Her voice had reached a boundary and would not cross it yet. Nia could feel that. She knew better than to press too hard when her mother sounded like that. The phone vibrated once more. This time it was not an email. It was a call. Unknown number, but the area code was local. Lena stared at it while it rang, the sound low and polite, and somehow more frightening than if it had been loud. Nia did not move. Neither did Lena. On the fourth ring, the voicemail clicked over. A man's voice, measured and professional, filled the kitchen. Miss Brooks, this is Daniel Mercer from Whitmore Holdings. Mr. Whitmore would like to speak with you personally tonight, if possible. He says there is something you deserve to know about Claire, and about the note your daughter carries. The message ended. The kitchen went still again. Lena's hand slowly closed around the edge of the table. Nia looked down at the old folded paper in her fingers, then back up at her mother's face. And in the silence that followed, both of them understood the same thing at once. Whatever the note had meant all these years, it was no longer only a memory. Nia did not know much about billionaires except that people on television said their names with a kind of careful respect, like the money itself might be listening. She knew they lived in places with elevators that opened into apartments, wore coats that never looked secondhand, and had assistants who sent emails instead of calling directly. None of that seemed like it belonged in apartment 2B with its humming refrigerator, its narrow kitchen, and the soft rattle of old pipes behind the wall. Yet there the name Whitmore sat now, heavy and shining and strange, right between the salt shaker and the stack of unpaid utility envelopes Lena kept clipped together with a binder clip. The dishes stayed on the table longer than usual that night. Lena washed them slowly, standing at the sink with her shoulders slightly hunched, while Nia dried each plate and set it carefully into the cabinet with both hands. The routine should have soothed them. Usually it did. But tonight every small sound seemed sharper than it should have been. The faucet, the clink of a spoon, the buzz of Lena's phone lighting up again on the counter. Nia kept glancing toward it, even when she told herself not to. She had never seen her mother unsettled by attention before. Bills, yes. Long shifts, yes. Sudden school calls, yes. But this was different. This felt as if the air had changed in the apartment, and neither of them knew what it might become by morning. Go put your pajamas on, Lena said at last, not turning from the sink. You have school tomorrow. Nia dried the last fork and slid it into the drawer. Are you going to call him back? Lena reached for the dish towel and wiped her hands more than they needed wiping. Not tonight. Nia nodded, but the answer did not settle inside her. She went to the bedroom they shared, where one twin bed sat against the wall and the other fit beneath the window. The room. smelled faintly of lavender detergent and old books. A nightlight glowed low in the corner, throwing a warm amber shape across the carpet. Nia changed into soft cotton pajamas and brushed her teeth at the small bathroom sink, while her mind kept circling the same pieces. Claire Whitmore. The note. Gabriel Whitmore. He remembers you. Something you deserve to know. Those words were not shaped like ordinary things. They were shaped like doors. When she came back to the bedroom, Lena was already sitting on the edge of Nia's bed, the folded note in her hands. She looked tired in the yellow lamplight, but softer somehow, as if memory had worn down the hard edges the day had given her. Nia climbed under the blanket and tucked her feet into the cool sheets. Lena smoothed the comforter over her legs the way she had when Nia was smaller, then sat there with one hand resting lightly near her daughter's ankle. "You are thinking too loud," she said gently. Nia blinked. "You can hear that. I am your mother." That drew the smallest smile from the child, but it faded fast. "Mama, did I do something wrong?" Lena's head turned at once. "No, at school. With the lunch." "No, baby. Then why does it feel like everything got bigger because of it?" Lena looked down at the note and then back at her daughter. Her eyes were tired, but clear, because sometimes small things tell the truth louder than big ones. Nia was quiet. She accepted answers the way some children accepted weather, not because she understood all of it, but because she trusted the sky would explain itself eventually. Lena leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Sleep," she said softly. "Morning makes some things easier." Nia wanted to believe that. She really did. But long after the apartment lights went out and the hallway outside their door fell quiet, sleep did not come easy. She lay on her side, listening to the building breathe around her. A toilet flushed in another unit. Someone coughed down the hall. Tires hissed faintly on the wet street below. The radiator clicked now and then like a watch with an uneven heart. Across the room, Lena sat at the folding table by the window with only the lamp on, her phone face up beside her and the note unfolded in front of her like a map she had not meant to open again. Nia kept her eyes half closed so her mother would think she was asleep. She watched the light catch on the side of Lena's face, watched her stare at the words on that old paper as if they might answer back. Once, Lena picked up the phone. Once, she put it down without unlocking it. Then, sometime after 10, she rose quietly and stepped out into the living room. Nia slipped from bed and padded to the bedroom doorway in her socks, careful not to make the floor creak. From there, she could see only part of the living room, the brown arm of the couch, the lamp, and the reflection of rainwater streaks still faint on the glass. She could hear her mother's voice, though low and careful. She had called someone. "I know who it says it is," Lena was whispering. "That is exactly why I have not answered." A pause. "No, Denise, I am not scared of him." Another pause, longer this time. "I am scared of what comes with being remembered." Nia stood very still in the dark hallway. The sentence moved through her in a way she could not explain. Being remembered had sounded good earlier. Important. Now it sounded heavy. Lena sighed on the other end of the call, the kind of sigh that seemed to come from years instead of lungs. "You do not understand," she murmured. Claire was one thing. Claire was kindness. Her brother was grief wrapped in money. And grief like that changes shape when it grows up. More silence. Then softer, almost to herself. "I buried that whole chapter because I thought it was done." Nia slipped back to bed before her mother returned. She lay flat under the blanket, eyes closed, heart awake. A moment later Lena came back into the room and stood there for a long time, maybe thinking Nia was asleep, maybe needing a second before she could be only a mother again. Then she crossed to her own bed and sat down slowly. In the darkness, her voice came soft as worn cotton. "Some doors do not stay shut just because you ask nicely." Nia did not move. She was not even sure if the words were meant for her. Sometime after that, the apartment finally settled. The lamp clicked off. Rain stopped altogether. The building quieted into that deep midnight hush where even worry seemed to lower its voice. But sleep, when it came, did not stay gentle. Nia dreamed of a long white hallway she had never seen, bright enough to hurt, with hospital floors that reflected feet and shadows. At the end of it stood a girl with light hair and a folded piece of paper in her hand. She was smiling, but only a little, as if she knew something Nia did not yet know. Behind her, farther back, a boy stood in the doorway wearing a dark coat, his face blurred by light. Nia could not hear him, but she knew he was calling for someone. When she woke just before dawn, the room was gray and cold and still. Her pillow was warm beneath one cheek. Across the room, Lena was already up, dressed for work in fresh scrubs, her hair pulled back, her phone in one hand. The moment she saw Nia awake, she put it down too quickly. But not before Nia caught the glow of a message on the screen. It was from Daniel Mercer again. Mr. Whitmore will be at Maple Ridge Elementary this morning. He hopes to speak with you both after the meeting with Mrs. Harper. Morning came in thin gray layers through the apartment window, the kind of early light that made everything look honest. The radiator had gone quiet. The rain was gone. In the kitchen, Lena moved with the fast, practiced rhythm of a woman trying to outrun her own thoughts. Coffee steamed in a chipped mug by the sink. 2 slices of bread browned in the toaster. Nia sat at the small folding table in her school uniform, her cardigan buttoned right this time, her backpack already zipped except for the front pocket where the folded note rested like a second pulse. She watched her mother spread peanut butter carefully to the edges of the bread, then cut the sandwich corner to corner and wrap it in foil with the same precise hands that had once folded hospital linens and now sorted laundry at the medical center before dawn. Neither of them said much at first. The television stayed off. The only sounds were the toaster springing up, the scrape of a chair leg, the low hum of the refrigerator, and Lena's phone buzzing once on the counter before. She turned it face down. Nia noticed anyway. "Is he really coming to my school?" she asked. Lena slid the sandwich into the lunch bag and added a small orange beside it. That is what the message said. "Are you going to talk to him?" Lena closed the lunch bag more firmly than she meant to. "I'm going to talk to Mrs. Harper first." Nia nodded, but the answer felt like a door left cracked instead of opened. They drove to Maple Ridge in the soft rush of morning traffic, past gas stations, bus stops, and corner stores lifting their metal gates. The roads were still damp in places, shining under the pale sun. In the school parking lot, teachers crossed between rows of cars holding coffee cups and tote bags. The American flag above the entrance stirred in a light breeze, and children poured toward the front doors in bright jackets and backpacks, already loud with the ordinary importance of a school day. Yet something was different. Nia felt it before she could name it. Adults were looking longer than usual. Not rudely, just knowingly. A crossing guard smiled at her with surprise in his face. A mother near the sidewalk whispered something to another parent and then glanced over with softened eyes. Near the office entrance, the same parent volunteer who had laughed in the cafeteria the day before stood frozen for half a second when she saw Nia, then offered a smile too careful to be casual. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said. Nia answered politely, but stayed close to her mother's side. Inside, the school smelled of pencil shavings, floor wax, and the faint sweetness of syrup from somebody's dropped breakfast waffle. The front office was busier than usual. The secretary was already on one phone while setting a visitor badge on the counter with her free hand. Another staff member carried in a tray of papers, glanced up, and paused when she recognized Lena. "Mrs. Brooks, Mrs. Harper is waiting for you in the conference room," the secretary said. Her tone was kind, but there was a brightness behind it now, the unmistakable hum of a place where news had arrived before the people inside it knew how to settle. Nia stood straighter. "Can I go to class?" she asked. Lena looked down at her daughter, and for a moment the noise in the office seemed to dim. "Go on, baby. Be your regular self." Nia gave a small nod, though regular no longer felt like a thing she could put on that morning. She started down the hallway toward room 12, sneakers whispering over the waxed floor, backpack bumping softly against her shoulders. As she passed the mounted television near the library, she saw her own face again in the silent loop of yesterday's cafeteria clip, the yellow cardigan bright under the fluorescent lights, her small hands breaking a sandwich in 3. She looked away quickly. In class, Ethan and Sophie were already there. Ethan stood the moment he saw her. "My dad saw the video," he blurted out, then flushed red all over again. "He said you were the nicest person in 2nd grade. Sophie leaned forward in her seat. "My grandma cried." Nia did not know what to do with any of that, so she smiled the smallest smile and slid into her chair by the window. Mrs. Harper entered a minute later, her expression gentle but alert. She rested one hand on the back of Nia's chair as the class settled. "You are all going to have a normal day," she announced in the bright, steady voice teachers used when they needed to make children believe something before it was true. Spelling test after lunch. Science folders out. A few kids groaned. Normal, then, or an imitation of it. The morning moved in pieces. Morning announcements. Pledge. Reading groups. Pencil taps. The scent of dry erase marker and the rustle of worksheets. But every so often the classroom door opened, and each time it did, Nia's heart knocked once against her ribs before settling again. At 10:15, the principal stepped in and beckoned Mrs. Harper into the hallway. At 10:20, the guidance counselor appeared with a clipboard and gave Nia one long, reassuring look before leaving without speaking. At 10:32, a black sedan pulled into the front drive where the buses usually lined up, long and polished and out of place against the brick school building and the patchy grass along the curb. Children at the windows began whispering. Nia could not see the car from her seat, but she felt the change in the room the way small animals felt weather pressure before a storm. Mrs. Harper noticed too. She crossed calmly to the blinds and tilted them closed. "Eyes on your books," she said. Her voice remained even, but her hand lingered on the cord a second longer than it needed to. In the office, Lena sat across from Mrs. Harper and Mr. Delaney at a small conference table with a paper cup of untouched coffee in front of her. She had barely slept. It showed now in the way she held her shoulders, in the way one hand stayed flat over her purse as though anchoring herself. Mrs. Harper had been kind, practical, and direct. They had spoken about media requests, about privacy, about free lunch forms Lena accepted only after being told they could be backdated quietly. It was the sort of conversation that could have stayed manageable if not for the soft knock that came at the conference room door just then. Mr. Delaney rose to answer it. The hallway beyond was bright with mid-morning light, and in that rectangle of open space stood a man in a charcoal coat, silver at the temples, tall enough to make the doorway seem narrower than it was. He was not flanked by cameras, not by reporters, just one assistant standing a respectful step behind him, holding a leather folio. Gabriel Whitmore had arrived exactly as his message promised, and when Lena Brooks looked up and saw his face clearly for the first time in 20 years, the blood drained from her hands before she could stop it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The conference room seemed too small for the history that had just stepped into it. Morning light came thin through the wired glass window beside the door, drawing pale bars across the table and the untouched coffee cup in front of Lena. Gabriel Whitmore stood very still, one hand at his side, the other loosely holding a pair of reading glasses he looked as though he had forgotten to put away. Time had changed him the way time changed expensive things, not by softening them, but by sharpening what was already there. His suit was dark, immaculate, cut close through the shoulders. Silver threaded his hair at the temples. The hard-edged grief had once carved into his face had not disappeared. It had simply learned better manners. But when his eyes met Lena's, something old and unguarded moved through them so quickly it was almost easy to miss. Recognition. Mr. Delaney cleared his throat with the polite discomfort of a man who knew he was suddenly standing near a conversation much larger than himself. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, extending a hand. Gabriel took it briefly without looking away from Lena. "Thank you for allowing me to come." His voice was lower than Lena remembered, steadier too, but it carried the same restrained force underneath, as if every word had to pass through control before entering the room. Mrs. Harper rose from her chair and offered a quiet greeting. Daniel Mercer, the assistant, remained near the door with the practiced stillness of someone trained to take up as little attention as possible in rooms where important people needed space. Gabriel stepped inside. The door closed softly behind him. "Miss Brooks," he said. "Not Lena. Not Mrs. Brooks. Miss Brooks," as if the years between now and then had folded inward in one respectful motion. Lena's fingers tightened once around the strap of her purse before releasing. "Mr. Whitmore." Her voice came out even, but only because she had willed it to. He gave a slight nod, then glanced down at the table, perhaps to gather himself, perhaps because memory had arrived too quickly to meet head-on. "I saw the video last night." Lena said nothing. Mrs. Harper and Mr. Delaney exchanged a look and quietly excused themselves with the instinctive tact of people who knew they were no longer needed in the center of the frame. Mrs. Harper paused only long enough to rest a reassuring hand on Lena's shoulder. Then the adults from the school stepped into the hallway, leaving the door cracked by a fraction before Mr. Delaney gently drew it shut. Now it was only Lena, Gabriel, and Daniel inside the room, with the hum of distant classroom life moving faintly beyond the walls. Gabriel remained standing for another second, then seemed to think better of it, and took the chair across from Lena, leaving enough space to suggest courtesy, not distance. Daniel stayed by the door, silent. "I did not come to make your life harder," Gabriel said. "I believe it already became harder the moment that video spread." Lena let out a breath through her nose. That is a thoughtful thing for a billionaire to notice. The line was not cruel, but it carried enough truth to land. Gabriel accepted it without flinching. "I suppose I earned that." Lena studied him. 20 years ago, he had been all controlled fury and expensive helplessness, a young man standing in hospital corridors with grief rising off him like heat from pavement. Now he looked like someone who had built an empire on decisions and distance. And yet here, he was in a public elementary school conference room, speaking carefully to a woman most people in his position would have sent another email to avoid facing. That meant something. She was just not yet sure what. Gabriel folded his glasses once, then unfolded them again. "Your daughter said 6 words yesterday," he said quietly. "And I heard my sister's voice so clearly that I had to sit down." Lena's expression changed, but only around the eyes. "Nia does not know Claire. She only knows the note." "I know." His gaze dropped to the tabletop. "That is why I am here." The room went quiet except for the distant ring of a school bell somewhere down the hall. Gabriel lifted his head again, and now the composure in him looked thinner, as though memory had begun pressing against it from behind. "Claire wrote that line 3 weeks before she died," he said. "She wrote it in a children's ward with a paper bracelet still on her wrist and a pencil she kept borrowing from nurses because she claimed hospital pencils wrote sadder than regular ones." For the first time since he entered, the corner of Lena's mouth moved, not quite a smile, more the ache of one. "That sounds like her." Gabriel nodded. "It does." His voice roughened almost imperceptibly, then steadied. "I did not know she gave the note to you." Lena looked down at her hands. "She did. Why did you never tell us?" There it was. Not accusation. Not exactly. But the question had been waiting behind everything else. Lena lifted her eyes and met his directly. "Because not every kindness belongs in a family trust report." Daniel Mercer shifted his weight, the smallest movement in the room. Gabriel did not. He held her gaze and absorbed the answer the way a man absorbed whether he could not command to stop. Then he nodded once. "Fair." He set the glasses on the table beside his hand. "I am not here for the note alone, Lena." Her name now, spoken with care, as if he knew he had crossed from formal memory into something more dangerous. Lena felt her shoulders stiffen. "Then why are you here?" Gabriel looked toward the wired glass window in the door where blurred shapes of children moved past in bursts of color and noise. So young they still ran in hallways when they thought no one important was looking. When he spoke again, his voice had lowered. "Because yesterday, when I saw your daughter sharing her lunch, I did not just recognize Claire." He paused, and the pause itself felt deliberate, heavy with something he had clearly debated saying out loud. "I recognized you." Lena's breath caught, but only just. "Me?" The way she divided everything precisely. The way she made dignity look like second nature. The way she protected someone else's embarrassment before her own hunger. He leaned back slightly, though nothing about him relaxed. "Claire learned that from someone. I spent years thinking she simply arrived in the world kind. But she did not. She was changed by someone. By you." Lena looked away then, toward the coffee she had not touched, toward the pale ring of moisture beneath the cup, toward anything that was not his face. "Children teach each other things," she said softly. "Sometimes." Gabriel's expression tightened, not in disagreement, but in the effort of staying honest. "That is not all she learned from you." His hand came to rest flat on the table, fingers spread once, then closed again. "There is something about Claire's last months you do not know, or perhaps you were never told fully. Something about my family, and what you gave us, and what my sister asked me to do if I ever found you again." The room seemed to narrow around the sentence. Lena looked back up slowly. On the other side of the wall, somewhere down the corridor, children's laughter rose and fell like a distant flock of birds. Inside the conference room, no one moved. Gabriel Whitmore held her gaze with the grave steadiness of a man who had come not to reclaim memory, but to answer to it. And when he spoke again, The first words were quiet enough to sound almost like confession. Lena, Claire was not the only life you saved in that hospital. The words did not land all at once. They seemed to move through the room in slow pieces, settling first into the silence, then into Lena's face, and only after that into meaning. She sat very still, her hands folded on the conference table, the untouched coffee cooling beside her, while the school around them went on with its ordinary morning sounds. A bell rang somewhere down the hall. A child laughed and was immediately hushed by a teacher. Papers shuffled in an office nearby, but inside that small room, time had been around one sentence. Gabriel Whitmore did not look away. The polished certainty people usually associated with men like him had thinned into something more human, more difficult to wear. What do you mean? Lena asked at last. Her voice was steady, but only because she had spent years learning how to hold herself together in rooms where she was not sure the floor would. Gabriel drew in a breath. He did not answer quickly, and that alone told her this was not a line rehearsed by lawyers or assistants. Claire was the one who saw you first, he said quietly. That is true. She noticed everyone. But when she got sick and the treatments began wearing her down, she changed in ways I did not understand at the time. She became frightened in small, quiet ways. Not dramatic. Not loud. She would smile for my parents, joke with doctors, thank nurses by name. Then in the middle of the night, she would panic if she woke up alone. Lena's fingers tightened once against each other. Hospital light came back to her in a rush she had not invited. Waxed floors. Soft shoes. The smell of sanitizer and warm plastic and coffee left too long on burners. There was a week, Gabriel continued, when my mother flew to Geneva for a specialist consult and my father kept leaving the hospital to manage things he claimed could not wait. I stayed when I could, but I was too young, too angry, too certain I needed to be useful in the ways rich families define usefulness. Phone calls, documents, demands. I kept thinking control was the same thing as care. He let the sentence sit there for a beat before going on. Claire did not want control. She wanted presence. And when she could not sleep, it was you she asked for. Lena blinked slowly, as if the room had shifted under her. Me? You? Gabriel's voice had softened now, though the weight in it had not. The nurses began saying your name at the desk when she was restless. Lena from evenings. Lena from the cafeteria. Lena who brought her crackers when the tray food made her nauseous. Lena who never looked at her like she was already halfway gone. Daniel Mercer remained motionless by the door, his eyes lowered in the disciplined neutrality of a man accustomed to private truths arriving in public spaces. Gabriel continued, quieter still. You sat with her. You read to her. You told her stories about your mother's church hats and the corner store cat that acted like it owned the block. You let her complain when everyone else kept asking her to be brave. She trusted you. Lena looked down at the table because the memory was too near now. She could see Claire's pale fingers picking at the edge of a blanket. Could hear her saying hospital ice tasted lonely unless somebody else had some too. Could remember the way the girl would tilt her head when she wanted the truth and had already decided not to accept anything watered down. She was easy to love, Lena said softly. Gabriel's expression changed at that. Something cracked open behind his restraint and showed, only for a second, the boy he had once been. Yes, he said. She was. The conference room held stillness the way a church held air. Outside the door, a student's sneakers squeaked across the floor and faded away. Gabriel rested his forearms lightly on the table. One night, he said, Claire's numbers dropped fast. The doctors moved quickly. People came in and out. My father was on the phone in the hallway trying to get someone from Boston on a charter flight. My mother was crying in the chapel because she thought no one could hear her there. And I was standing outside Claire's room doing absolutely nothing useful while pretending I was keeping it together. His jaw tightened, not from pride this time, but from the memory of not being able to save the one person his wealth had taught him he should have been able to save. You walked out of that room, looked at me, and said, if she sees fear on your face, she will carry it for you. Go wash your hands. Then come back and smiling, even if it feels borrowed. Lena's lips parted slightly. She remembered saying something like that. She had not remembered to whom. I did what you said, Gabriel went on. I was angry that you told me, and ashamed that you were right. I went to the restroom down the hall. I washed my hands for no reason except to do something that would keep me from breaking in half. Then I came back and smiling, badly, and sat beside my sister's bed while she slept. He looked toward the window and the door for a moment, then back to Lena. That was the first night in months I did not lose myself to panic. Lena had no answer ready for that. She had not known. Back then, she had only seen a wealthy young man carrying grief like a badly tailored coat, too stiff to fit and too costly to throw off. She had not known he hurt her at all. Gabriel's fingers touched the reading glasses beside him, then withdrew. After Claire died, everybody in my world began building monuments to certainty. Foundations, wings, scholarships, marble, press releases. My father called it legacy. My mother called it purpose. I called it movement because standing still felt impossible. He paused. But the truth is, the thing that kept me from becoming a colder man was not the money spent in her name. It was the way you had spoken to me in that hallway. The way you treated my sister as a child first and a tragedy second. The way you made care feel ordinary and therefore possible. Lena felt something turn slowly in her chest. Not pride, not exactly, but the deep, uneasy ache of being told a kindness survived farther than you ever imagined. You are giving me too much credit, she said, almost reflexively. Gabriel shook his head. No, I am correcting an omission. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and drew out a long cream envelope, slightly worn at the edges despite the quality of the paper. He placed it carefully on the table between them, not pushing it forward yet, only letting it exist there. Lena stared at it without touching it. What is that? A letter, Gabriel said. Claire wrote it during her last week. It was addressed to me, but there was a page inside meant for you. Lena's breath caught. I never received anything. I know, he said, because I kept it. The confession dropped without decoration, and somehow that made it heavier. I told myself I was preserving it, protecting it, waiting for the right time. The truth is, I was young and selfish and grieving, and I could not bear to let go of the only place where my sister had said your name as if it belonged inside our family. Lena looked at him then, fully, and whatever she saw in his face made anger useless. Not impossible, just secondary. He was ashamed. Not theatrically, not for effect, just plainly, like a man who had carried an old failure long enough to recognize its exact weight. What does it say? She asked. Gabriel slid the envelope toward her at last. That is for you to read. But before you do, there is something else you need to know. He stopped there, and for the first time since entering the school, his composure faltered visibly. He lowered his eyes, then lifted them again with effort. Claire did not only ask me to find you one day. She asked me to make sure your kindness was returned when life became hard for you. I failed that promise for 20 years. Lena's hand hovered over the envelope without touching it. Through the wired glass window in the door, a blur of small children passed by in a line, bright coats, swinging arms, lives still simple enough to be called from one room to another. Inside, Gabriel Whitmore sat across from her like a man at the edge of a reckoning, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost every trace of corporate polish. Then yesterday I saw your daughter give away her lunch as if generosity was the air she breathed, and I realized Claire had kept her promise to you better than I kept mine to her. Lena did not touch the envelope at first. She only looked at it lying there between them on the conference table, cream-colored and impossibly ordinary, the kind of paper that should have held a school notice or a medical bill or some simple thing with edges that fit inside a day. Instead it sat in the thin morning light, like a door left unopened for 20 years. Her hands remained folded in her lap, still, almost disciplined, but Gabriel could see the effort in that stillness. He had spent enough of his life around power to recognize restraint. This was not politeness. This was survival. Outside the conference room, the school moved on in muffled fragments. A teacher laughed somewhere down the hall. A copier started and stopped. Sneakers squeaked across waxed floor. The ordinary rhythm of an elementary school kept time around a moment that felt anything but ordinary. You kept it, Lena said at last. Her voice did not rise. It did not have to. The weight was already there. Gabriel nodded once. I did. For 20 years. Another nod. The admission seemed to cost him something, though perhaps not enough to equal the years themselves. Yes. Lena lowered her eyes to the envelope again. She remembered the hospital more clearly now than she had in years. The chill in the family waiting rooms. The over-brewed coffee in paper cups. The soft blue blankets that never seemed warm enough. Claire's laugh coming thin but bright from a bed too large for her small frame. She remembered the girl asking questions other adults found inconvenient and then smiling in a way that made them answer anyway. She remembered promising nothing because children like Claire deserved truth, not theater. And somewhere in the blur of those months, she remembered one evening when Claire had looked unusually serious and said, "You should not disappear when all this is over." Lena had smiled then and changed the subject because disappearing was the one thing life had taught her to do well. "Why now?" she asked, still looking at the envelope instead of him. "Why bring this now?" Gabriel exhaled through his nose, a quiet sound that might have been the closest thing to helplessness he allowed himself anymore. "Because yesterday I watched your daughter give away food she needed, and in one instant I saw what I had been refusing to see for years. Kindness does not vanish just because powerful people fail to honor it. It keeps traveling. It changes hands. It survives us." Lena's throat tightened unexpectedly. She hated that sentence for almost being beautiful. She hated it more for being true. "You do not get to show up after 20 years and speak in revelations," she said softly. "You do not get to turn your delay into poetry." Gabriel absorbed that without defense. Daniel Mercer, still by the door, looked down at the floor with the tact of a man who understood when language had become too personal to witness directly. Gabriel's answer, when it came, was stripped of polish. "You are right." He rested one hand on the table, palm open, no performance in it. "I am not asking you to make this noble for me, Lena. It was wrong. I was wrong. I let grief become ownership. I told myself I was protecting Claire's last words. Really, I was keeping one part of her where only I could reach it." Lena finally lifted her eyes to his. There it was. Not the billionaire. Not the public man who moved markets and sat on boards. Just the brother. Older now. Better dressed. Better practiced. But still standing in some hidden hallway of loss. Still carrying a letter he should have let go of long ago. "And then what?" she asked. "You forgot." Gabriel's face changed at that, the smallest flinch, the kind that comes when a sentence lands too close to the truth. "No," he said quietly. "That is the worst part. I did not forget. I remembered badly. Intermittently. Conveniently. On birthdays. On anniversaries. On the kind of nights when tall windows and expensive scotch do not protect you from yourself. I would take the letter out, read her page, stop at yours, and put it back." Lena stared at him. "You never even opened mine?" "I did once," he said. "The first week after the funeral. And then I hated myself for reading words not meant for me. So I sealed it again. I told myself I would find you. Then my father got sick. Then the company crisis happened. Then my mother moved to London. Then there was always another quarter, another merger, another excuse dressed as necessity." His mouth tightened. "Years are very good at disguising cowardice when a person has money." The conference room went quiet. Lena looked at the envelope and felt two different angers moving inside her at once. One belonged to the past, to a young woman too tired and too poor to chase lost things through wealthy families and hospital records. The other belonged to now, to the woman she had become, who had raised a child alone in a two-bedroom apartment, stretched paychecks across rent and school shoes and winter cough medicine, and never once imagined that somewhere in a safe drawer or private file box lay a page written to her by a girl she had loved. Her hand moved before she fully decided to let it. Her fingertips touched the edge of the envelope. The paper was smooth, heavy, expensive. Of course it was. But the corner was softened by age, and that softened corner undid her more than she expected. This had been carried, opened, closed, hidden, preserved, denied. She slid it toward herself slowly. Gabriel did not move. "Did Claire know?" she asked. "About me being poor, I mean. About my mother. About what life was actually like for us." Gabriel's answer came without hesitation. She knew enough. Lena gave a faint, humorless smile. "Claire always knew enough. More than most adults in our family," he said. The dryness in his voice was brief, but real. Lena let her thumb rest on the seal. "And what did she ask you to do for me?" Gabriel's gaze dropped to the envelope, then returned to her face. "To find you if I ever could. To make sure you had help if you ever needed it. Not charity," he added immediately, as if he knew the word itself might close the room. She underlined that part. "She said you would hate charity but accept fairness if it was offered cleanly." Lena let out one short breath that might have been a laugh if it had carried any ease. She was right about that too. Gabriel's expression softened for the first time. She usually was. For a second, both of them seemed to feel Claire there, not as ghost or miracle, but as a force of memory so specific it changed the temperature of the room. A child with clear eyes and a stubborn heart. A child who had once written a sentence on hospital paper and somehow sent it traveling across 2 decades into the lunchbox of a 9-year-old girl she would never meet. Lena broke the seal. The sound was small, barely more than a whisper of paper parting, but it seemed to rearrange something in the air. Inside was a folded letter, cream pages with ink that had faded to the softened blue of old evening. One sheet sat tucked behind the first, smaller, addressed in a child's careful hand. For Lena. Her throat closed around a breath. Gabriel looked away then, giving her privacy without leaving. Daniel Mercer turned his face slightly toward the window. Lena unfolded the smaller page first. The paper trembled now because her hands did. The handwriting tilted a little more than she remembered, as if Claire had been tired when she wrote it. Lena read the first line silently, and the room disappeared. Dear Lena, if Gabriel is giving you this, then it means he finally listened. Lena read the line twice before the words stopped looking like ink and started sounding like Claire. Not the Claire in photographs or memories softened by time, but the real girl, the one with the sharp little observations and the impossible calm that had made adults tell her the truth even when they had meant to protect themselves with kinder lies. Dear Lena, if Gabriel is giving you this, then it means he finally listened. A breath caught high in Lena's chest. Her eyes moved down the page. The handwriting tilted a little crooked in places, as if the child who wrote it had paused often, or grown tired, or simply wanted each word to land in exactly the right place. Thank you for never talking to me like I was already gone. Thank you for bringing me crackers when the food smelled strange, and for telling me that the moon over the parking lot looked the same even when people were scared. Thank you for saying my brother was not cold, only lost inside love. Lena swallowed hard. Across from her, Gabriel kept his gaze lowered, giving her what privacy he could inside a school conference room with thin walls and bright institutional light. Daniel Mercer remained by the door, still as furniture. The school day beyond the glass carried on in muffled sounds. A child's laugh, a rolling cart, the distant rise and fall of a teacher's voice. But to Lena, it all had the faraway quality of weather heard from underwater. She kept reading. I know grown-ups think money can do more than it can, and I know my family is used to making things neat after they break. But not everything should be polished. Some things should be remembered right. You remembered me right. Tears gathered before Lena could stop them. She blinked once, then again, and the paper trembled lightly in her hands. Claire's words continued, small and direct and more merciful than most adults ever managed to be. I asked Gabriel to help you one day if you ever needed it, because I think people like us do not get the same kind of waiting room. I have noticed that rich people get doors opened before they even knock, and people like you have to stand straight just to be treated regular. If he is older when you read this, maybe he will understand what I mean. If he is still stubborn, tell him I said so. A sound escaped Lena then, half laugh and half ache. It was so precisely Claire that for one suspended second the years between then and now seemed clumsy, unnecessary things. Gabriel looked up at that sound, and something in his face softened when he realized why it had come. Lena went on. Also, if life gets hard for you later, and I think it might because life is hard for kind people in ways nobody admits, please let somebody help without thinking it makes your goodness smaller. It does not. I know you do not like pity. I do not either. I am not talking about pity. I am talking about fairness arriving late and still counting. Lena had to stop then. She lowered the page for a moment and pressed the heel of her hand gently against her mouth. The fluorescent light above them buzzed faintly. The coffee in its paper cup had gone cold. Gabriel did not speak. He only sat with the stillness of a man who understood that the center of the moment did not belong to him, even if his failure had shaped it. When Lena looked back down, the last lines were shorter, the handwriting a little shakier. Please tell your mother I liked the church hat story the best. Please do not disappear on purpose. And if you ever have a little girl, teach her to share only if she wants to, not because the world expects sweet things from tired people. Love, Claire. Lena let the page fall slightly into her lap. Her shoulders had gone rigid with the effort of holding emotion in a shape she could survive. For a long moment, no one in the room moved. Then Gabriel spoke, and his voice had lost every polished edge it arrived with. There is more. Lena looked up through tears she made no attempt to hide now. Gabriel reached into the envelope and slid forward the second sheet, larger, folded once. The rest was written to me, he said. But there is a part you should hear. Lena wiped beneath one eye quickly with the side of her thumb and nodded without trusting herself to speak. Gabriel unfolded the page with care that bordered on reverence. His own hands were steady, but only just. When he read, his voice changed again, becoming something lower and older and much closer to the boy he must have once been in those hospital corridors. Gabriel, if you are reading this when you are very sad, do not become the kind of man who thinks being serious is the same as being good. Also, do not let Father turn me into a building. Buildings do not hug people. The corner of Lena's mouth moved despite everything. Gabriel paused there, breathing once before continuing. If you ever meet Lena again, you have to listen to her. Really listen. Not in the way people listen when they are waiting to help from above. Listen sideways, like equals do. He stopped for half a beat. The paper trembled once between his fingers. And if she needs something one day, do not send flowers, and do not send one of your assistants with that face you make when you think money is a language everybody wants to hear. Show up yourself. Bring your actual heart, even if it is inconvenient. Daniel Mercer lowered his eyes further at that line, as if even he could feel Claire pointing at his employer from across 2 decades. Gabriel continued, quieter now. You owe her more than gratitude. We all do. Not because she rescued me from sadness, though she did help. Not because she was nice to our family when she did not have to be, though she was. You owe her because she treated me like I was still capable of being decent when I had started to enjoy being difficult. That time Lena did laugh, very softly, and the sound cracked open something gentler in the room. Gabriel lowered the letter and met her eyes. There was no defense left in his face now. No billionaire, no institution, no carefully curated self. Only a man who had finally run out of distance. She was right, he said. About all of it. About me. About what I should have done. About fairness. Lena looked down at Claire's page in her lap. Fairness. Arriving late and still counting. The sentence felt like a hand set carefully at the center of her back. Not pushing. Not pitying. Just steadying. She took a slow breath. And what exactly are you here to do now, Gabriel? The use of his first name made Daniel glance up for the briefest second, but Gabriel did not seem surprised. If anything, he looked relieved by the absence of title. He set the letter down and answered plainly. First, I am here to apologize without dressing it up as destiny. I failed to find you. I failed to honor Claire's request. And because of that failure, you carried life alone through years when help should have reached you cleanly. He leaned forward slightly, elbows near the table, hands open. Second, I am here because your daughter should not become a public symbol while still worrying whether lunch will be enough. That ends now, if you will allow it, and only in ways you can approve. Lena listened without interrupting. Her tears had quieted, but her eyes were still bright. And third, she asked. Gabriel's gaze drifted toward the door, toward the hallway where children were passing in bright lines in ordinary shoes, then back to her. Third, he said. I am here because I would like to meet the little girl who carried Claire's words into a cafeteria and made a room remember what decency sounds like. But before I ask for that, I need you to know something else. He reached into the folio Daniel had been holding and drew out a thin folder, not flashy, just cream paper and careful tabs. He set it beside the envelope. This is not charity. It is a trust created in Claire's name this morning, funded privately, structured by attorneys overnight, and written so that neither you nor Nia owe me access, gratitude, or publicity in return. Education, housing stability if you ever want to move, full nutrition support, and a family fund under your control with independent oversight. No cameras, no press release, no naming rights. Only what Claire asked for in the plainest language available to adults who usually complicate everything. Lena stared at the folder, then at him, unable for a second to speak at all. The room had gone still again, but this time the stillness felt less like a door closing and more like one opening very slowly on well-oiled hinges. Gabriel did not smile. He did not reach across the table. He simply sat there in the clean, hard light of an elementary school conference room and waited, not like a savior, not like a benefactor, but but like a man finally willing to be judged by whether he had learned to listen. Lena did not reach for the folder immediately. She sat with Claire's letter in one hand and the promise of something long delayed resting on the table beside it, while the conference room held its breath around her. Morning had brightened outside the narrow, wired window in the door. The school was fully awake now. Children's voices drifted down the hall in quick, warm bursts. Lockers clicked shut. A teacher called for a line to slow down, and somewhere nearby a copy machine gave its steady mechanical sigh. Ordinary life continued with almost insulting ease. Yet inside that small room, a woman who had spent years making do with too little was being asked to believe that fairness could still arrive without disguise. Lena looked at the cream folder, then at Gabriel, then back at the page Claire had written in a hand too young to sound so wise. Fairness arriving late and still counting. The words settled somewhere deep, past suspicion, past pride, into the place where exhausted people kept the truths they did not dare name too quickly. No cameras, Lena said at last. Her voice was quiet but firm. No speeches. My daughter does not become anybody's lesson. Gabriel nodded immediately. Agreed. No reporters waiting outside my job. Never. And if I say no to any part of this, that no stays no. A flicker of something moved through his face then, not offense, not impatience. Only respect sharpened by relief. It does. Lena studied him a second longer, measuring not his money, not his last name, but the steadiness in his answer. Then she placed Claire's page carefully back into the envelope and rested one hand on the folder without opening it. All right, she said. Then we start with school. Quietly. Gabriel's shoulders lowered by a fraction, the first visible sign that he had been bracing for refusal. Quietly, he echoed. Daniel Mercer stepped forward at last, not intruding, just near enough to place a single business card beside the folder and explain in a low professional voice that the trust documents could be reviewed by Lena's own attorney at Whitmore Holdings' expense. No deadlines, no public filings beyond what was legally required, no obligations beyond her approval. Lena almost smiled at that. You assume I have an attorney. Daniel did not flinch. Then the first step is making sure you do. Gabriel rose slowly from his chair, not because the meeting was finished, but because some moments needed less sitting and more honesty. There is one more thing, he said. Lena looked up. Nia. Her expression changed at once, softening along the edges the way only her daughter could make it do. You said you wanted to meet her. Gabriel nodded. If you allow it. Just as myself. Not as some man arriving to change her life in an afternoon. Children should not have to manage adults' guilt before lunch. The sentence surprised a sound out of Lena that was almost a laugh. No, she said, wiping once beneath her eye with the heel of her hand. They should not. She rose too then, smoothing her scrub top instinctively, as if meeting the rest of the day required a little straightening first. Claire's letter stayed in her hand. The folder stayed tucked beneath her arm. For one brief second, she and Gabriel stood facing each other in the plain school conference room, no longer divided by the same distance that had once existed between a hospital family in private suites and a tired young woman working doubles. Grief had crossed that distance first. A child's kindness had crossed it again years later. Perhaps that was how the best things traveled, not by power, but by being carried. When they stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights felt harsher than the soft conference room air. Students moved in neat classroom lines, some glancing curiously at the sharply dressed stranger beside the principal's office before being guided onward by teachers. Mrs. Harper emerged from room 12 with a stack of reading folders and stopped when she saw them. Her eyes went to Lena first. It was a good teacher's instinct, checking the face that mattered most. Lena gave the smallest nod. Mrs. Harper's shoulders eased. Nia is in the library for silent reading, she said softly. I thought she might need a little calm. Lena thanked her. Then the three adults walked together down the hall, their footsteps muted by wax tile and old institutional rugs. The library smelled of paper, dust, and crayons warmed by the sun. Light fell through high windows and clean rectangles across low shelves and beanbag chairs. In the far corner, under a bulletin board filled with hand-drawn book characters, Nia sat cross-legged with a paperback open in her lap. Her backpack rested beside her, one small hand draped over the front pocket without thinking, guarding the folded note the way she always had. She looked up when she heard her mother's voice say her name. At first she saw only Lena. Then her gaze shifted to the man beside her, tall in his charcoal coat, silver at the temples, suddenly awkward in a room built for children. Nia stood. She did not hide behind her mother. She never quite did. But she moved close enough that the sleeve of Lena's scrubbed top brushed her arm. Gabriel stopped several feet away, careful not to crowd the air around her. For a second, he simply looked at the child who had broken a sandwich into thirds and unknowingly opened the locked drawer of his life. In her face, there was none of Claire's coloring, none of her features, none of the obvious things memory usually grabbed first. And yet there it was all the same, in the seriousness, the steadiness, the unperformed kindness sitting naturally on a small frame. "Hello, Nia," he said. His voice had lost its boardroom steel entirely. "My name is Gabriel Whitmore." Nia looked up at him with solemn dark eyes that missed very little. "You are Claire's brother," she said. He nodded once. "I am." Nia considered that, then glanced at her mother, who gave her the kind of look that said trust your own reading of the room. So she did. "My mama said Claire wrote the note." Gabriel's throat moved once before he answered. "She did." Nia bent, unzipped the front pocket of her backpack, and drew the folded paper out with both hands. The edges were soft from years of being carried. She held it up, not like proof, not like a prize, but like something living that belonged to more than one person. "I kept it safe," she said. Gabriel looked at the note, and then at the little girl holding it, and something in him gave way so quietly that only Lena, standing nearest, saw it happen. His eyes shone, not with spectacle, not with dramatic grief, but with the simple shock of tenderness meeting truth after too long apart. "I know," he said. Nia took one step forward and offered the note to him. He did not take it. "No," he said gently. "It belongs with you now." She seemed to think about that. Then, in the plain, bright silence of the school library, she folded the paper once more and placed it back into her backpack. Not hidden. Kept. The gesture was so small that only a few people in the room would have noticed its grace. Lena noticed. Gabriel noticed. Mrs. Harper, standing quietly near the circulation desk pretending to sort returned books, noticed too. Nia looked up again. "Are you sad?" she asked. Adults often forgot children could ask direct questions without cruelty. Gabriel did not seem offended. If anything, he looked relieved by the absence of ceremony. "Sometimes," he said honestly. Nia nodded, accepting the answer as sufficient. "Claire sounds nice." A soft breath of laughter passed through Lena before she could stop it. Gabriel smiled then, the first real smile of the morning, small and imperfect and entirely changed by sorrow. "She was," he said. "Very." Nia seemed satisfied with that. She reached into her lunch bag, pulled out the sandwich Lena had packed that morning, and after a moment's thought broke one corner off the crust and ate it herself. Then she looked at the full sandwich, looked at Gabriel, and held it out a little. "Did you eat lunch yet?" Lena's eyes widened just enough to flash a warning she did not need to speak. Gabriel, however, seemed to understand the holiness of the offering. He crouched carefully so he was not towering over her, and shook his head with a softness that made him look years younger and years older all at once. "Not yet." Nia held the sandwich there for one more second, then drew it back and smiled a tiny, private smile. "Then do not eat like a stranger." The words landed in the library and changed it. No one moved. Dust floated in the slant of morning light. A page somewhere turned with a dry paper whisper. Mrs. Harper pressed her lips together and looked away. Lena's hand rose to cover her mouth as tears slipped free again, this time without resistance. Gabriel stayed, crouched there before the little girl, his eyes lifting slowly to Lena's, and in that look there was apology, gratitude, grief, and something rarer than all three. Learning. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that announces itself in statements and plaques and public generosity. The quiet kind. The kind that kneels when it should. Later, people would hear pieces of what happened next. They would hear that the school lunch program expanded without fanfare before the end of the month. They would hear that Lena Brooks moved her daughter into a brighter apartment by summer, one with windows that did not rattle in every storm. They would hear that a scholarship fund appeared in the district under Claire Whitmore's name, anonymous on paper except to those who needed to know. But in that moment, none of that had happened yet. There was only a small library, a little black girl with a sandwich in her hands, a mother clutching a letter that had arrived 20 years late, and a man who had finally understood that decency did not belong to the powerful. It belonged to the people who practiced it when nobody was watching. Outside the library windows, the sun moved higher and laid a warmer stripe of light across the carpet. Nia tucked her sandwich back into its foil, slid her backpack onto one shoulder, and reached for her mother's hand. Lena took it. Gabriel stood slowly, not as a man above them, but simply beside them. And for one still, ordinary, unforgettable second, the hallway beyond the library hummed with school day noise while inside. 3 lives stood quietly in the light Claire had left behind.